Sometimes your repetitive tasks also contain repetitive subtasks. In this case, you need a loop inside of a loop. These are also known as nested loops. Let's code an example where we need to find the average test scores for each student in a class. So I went ahead and initialized the things that we know. So we know that there's 24 students in a class and that there's 4 tests that have been given. So now we need to go through all of the students, all 24 of them. Since we know how many it is, we can use the for loop. And now that we have an individual student, once we go through an iteration of this for loop, we need to look at all 4 of their tests, which means we're going to need another loop. And we also know the count of that, so this would be a for loop as well. Now, as we're making this for loop, we have to be careful. You cannot use the same sentinel because this sentinel will still be valid as we're inside of this loop. So we have to use a totally different sentinel, which will control this inner for loop. Now, as we go inside of this inner for loop, what we're going to do is we're going to ask the user to give us the test score, and then we're going to add that test score to an accumulating variable called total. Now, because we need to add this to total each time, we're going to need to declare total before we get inside of the loop. And then we can update total inside of here. So if we would have put total inside of the inner loop, it would have been overwritten for every test and it wouldn't accumulate. So now we can prompt the user, asking them to enter the score and then add it to this total. Let's do that. Now here I just entered this j plus 1 because I want to use this number within here. So this is not doing anything to the j variable. It's not incrementing it or anything. This is simply for display. So this will say enter the score for test 1, 2, 3. And the reason there's this plus 1 is because j is 0 right now. So 0 plus 1 will be 1 for the first one and so on. So now we've gotten the score. We're going to run through this 4 times for student 1 and we'll have their final total here. And so after we finish this loop, we're still on the same student because we're still inside of here. We'll go ahead and get their test average and then we'll print it out. Okay, let's take a look at what we have here. So we have the initial for loop. This will go through each student. Then we say, okay, I'm starting off with this student. Let's say we're just looking at the first student. I'm starting off with the first student. Their total is 0 because I haven't counted anything yet. All right, let me look through their 4 tests. I'm going to look at the first test and I'm going to ask them the score of that. And then I'm going to read it in and then add it to their total. At first it was 0, but whatever they put in will be added to that. Then it's going to come back to the top of this loop because we're not done with it yet. We have to continue with this loop until we get to the number of tests. So I'll go and ask for test number 2. Add that to the total. Do the same for test 3, same for test 4. Once it completes this loop, is when it will come down here. Now we're still within this outer loop. So we'll say the average is the total, which has been updated, and we'll divide that total by the number of tests. Now that we have the average, we can go ahead and print. We're still on student 1 and their average. Once this is complete, it'll come back to this, go to the next student and do the same thing. Let's run it. So we'll say their first score is an 80, and then they got a 75, and then they got 50, and then they really cleaned up their act and got 100. So let's say the test average for student number 1 is 76, and then it continues on. So you go and ask for a test again. We'll just do one more student so you can see that it's 2, 59, 100, 95, and then 88. And then their score, see, student 2 is an 85. And this will continue on for all 24 students. There's a couple of more things that I want to highlight. Let's go to this letter search program again. Now, one thing I want to show you is with this incrementer. We've seen examples where we use the plus plus. We could also use a minus minus. So let's say that we wanted to traverse this string from the last character to the first character. We would change this up. I would equal to the text.length, and then we would say while I is greater than 0, and then we could use this I minus minus. Also, this condition does not have to be limited to just this sentinel. We can add any condition here, or we can even use compound conditions. For example, we use the break to say if we find the A, go ahead and break out of this. This is one option. The beautiful thing about programming is that you can implement things in multiple ways. Instead of using the break statement, we could leave this where we update letter found to true and say to continue looping this while the letter is not found and we don't have any more characters to go through. So we could change this condition in that way. Okay, we have a homework assignment for you that, of course, this is optional, individual exercise. You're going to make another game, Roll the Die. The objective of this game is to travel the entire game board of 20 spaces within 5 die rolls. So here are the steps for the game. You are going to write the program that rolls the die for the user. And in the program, you're not actually rolling a die. What you're going to do is generate a random number between 1 and 6. And I'm going to give you the code for this down below in the independent exercise section. So I know we haven't gone over how to generate a random number. That's down there. You can just use that code. Okay. Once you've generated that number, you are going to advance the user that number of spaces on the game board. After each roll, tell the user which game space they're on and how many more spaces they have to go in order to win. You're going to repeat this 4 additional times so that it's 5 rolls in total. Now, if your user gets to 20 before the 5 rolls in the game, they've won. Don't let them continue on to the 4th or 5th roll if they've already won. If they're greater than or less than 20 spaces at the end of the 5 rolls, then they lose. They have to be 20 spaces exactly in order to win. And remember, there are only 20 spaces on the board, so don't print out any messages like you've advanced to space 22. That's a bug. So check out the individual exercise section at the bottom. I have these instructions as well as the code for generating the random number and then also an example of the output. Good luck.